Hi, this video is about SAP Fiori Building Blocks and it's a beginner's guide. So before moving to Fiori, let's understand how SAP frameworks are designed. SAP had a long history of designing web frameworks to support growing demand of web applications, be it Web UI, BSP, WebDyn Pro, or Fiori. Every framework is designed to support business application and not intended to be used as a customer-facing application. For example, Fiori app wouldn't be a right choice for a store front-end website, but definitely it will be a top choice for inventory management in warehouse. SAP frameworks reduces complexity and maintenance of a business application by providing a default customizable UI layer, so developers can focus on a business logic without having to worry about the UI layer. But doing so gives less flexibility to UI customization and puts more emphasis on business functionality, which reduces overall development and maintenance cost. Every application contains minimum two parts. First, data storage, and second, UI presentation. The importance to each part is based on what kind of application we design. For SAP Fiori applications, the business logic has more importance than UI. So much of UI is generated based on predefined templates, and no need to start UI build from scratch. These predefined templates use metadata to generate UI, and the metadata is supplied by the data model. The technology behind passing data model along with the data output to UI is OData protocol. The OData protocol supplies data model through metadata and a data through queries. The combination of these two things makes Fiori application. Now to illustrate this example, I have drawn something here. You can see. So we have a table on the left side which has 5 columns and a form on the right side which is a UI, a rough sketch of a UI. So for a given table, the metadata would be the table definition, where we can see in the bottom section here, each field has its own attribute or attribute values. For example, first name would be a 50 character field, or last name would be a 50 character field, or age would be a 3 integer, or employed or not employed would be a boolean, and so on. So this metadata is supplied to a Fiori template, and based on this metadata information, Fiori template renders a form or a drop down or a checkbox. And the data, the table data is supplied as a data for the form, which you can see it here in blue. So to demonstrate, I have created a user tables. So let me switch to full screen there. So I have prepared 2 tables. Our data model would be a user data model, so we are going to maintain user information and user gender. So I created these 2 tables. First table, you can see user info here. I have user ID as a key, and then first name, last name, age, sex, and employed as a boolean, yes or no. And then we have another table as a foreign key for a gender information. Now using these 2 tables, we are going to build the data model for a Fiori app. Now we could use Gateway Service Builder or CDS or RESTful ABAP programming model based on which version of SAP native you are using. But for better understanding, I'm going to use Gateway Service Builder, which is fairly simple to understand and easy to start with. Once you understand the application flow, or once you understand the concept behind Fiori apps, then you can switch to CDS, and later you can move to the ABAP RESTful programming model. So to start with, if you are building your first Fiori application, then first thing we need to do is create a data model before even going to Fiori, and that's what we are going to do in SEGW transaction, which is a service builder. So here we'll create a new project. Like I said, this is a user information, so let's call user info project name and user info app. We'll store everything in a local package. So now we have our project. Now the next thing is, in a data model, we need to create entities, and these are the entities which will be mapped on a Fiori app. So let's create first entity as a user info. So user info, and the above structure which we are going to refer is user info. Next, so let's select all the fields except mandt. Key would be user ID. So that's our first entity here, user info. Now let's create second entity, and we are going to use the second entity later, gender list, to generate a drop down. So let's assign select the table user gender, and check mandate, key is the gender, and finish. Now, one thing I did not mention earlier is I did mention about the metadata and a data model. So most of the data model is supplied through metadata, but if for whatever reason, if we want to enhance the metadata, then we have to use annotations. Annotations are nothing but extensions to metadata. And we will see that when we'll come to that point. So now we have our entities, and there we can see their properties. These properties are required to map to its respective pages. So for example, if I don't want to show this field on create and update, I will not check these boxes, but the rest we need. So I'm gonna check these all. Filter, these can be filtered from screen, save, and generate. So this will create DCP and MCP classes, so that's fine. Local object, now our gateway service is generated, but we did not deploy yet. So let's deploy our gateway service. For that, we have to go in IWFND maintain service transaction. In here, if I sort this descending, we don't have user info here. So first thing we'll do is we'll add service. So go to add services. There in the system alias, select your system alias. If you are deploying service in a same system, then it should be local. If you are deploying this from another system and you have a centralized gateway system, then you have to select that system alias pointing to the system where your project is. So in my case, it's local, so I will leave it local and then get services, and then we'll sort descending. So here is our service user info generated from our gateway service builder. So let's select this and we'll add. So this is going to create the model, and it is also going to create the external service. So it's okay, enter. Service is created successfully. So if we go here, sort, and we have a service here. Now we can test this service by clicking on gateway here, down here, gateway client, and in here select the add URI option and select metadata. So by executing this, we'll extract, or we will fetch metadata from our model. So let's execute, and here we have our metadata. So our service is working as expected. Now let's move on to the Fiori component. So let me close the test tool. Now let's go to VS Code. If you haven't set up your VS Code, I would highly recommend to watch my earlier video, which I will leave a link on the top, where I have shown you how to install a VS Code for Fiori development. So first thing we will be doing is launching Open Application Generator Wizard by running Ctrl+Shift+P to call the command palette. From there, we'll choose a template for our application. Now there are several templates, or 4 templates: list report, work list, analytic page, and an overview page. The simplest is the list report to start with, which will have a list report page and an object page. So select that. Then next, in data source, we will select connect to system. In systems, select your system. In this case, I have my local system, so I'm going to select that. Then enter user ID and password. Again, if you're doing it this first time, I would highly recommend, I have a video on this one too, so go watch that. Once we get authenticated, it will show a list of services, and in the list we'll pick the one which we just generated, which is user info service. So select that and then next. Now by default, the wizard is gonna call the entities, and it is gonna list available entities, and we can select the one which we want. So default entity is user info, and the gender list is just the secondary entity, or the entity which we will be using it for a drop down list later. So just leave the user info here, then next. Then we can give module name. Let's call user info app, user info app. Path is projects. So it says there is already one, so I'm just going to remove that user info. Now it should be fine. So if I do P and then change back to P. Now the next thing is, do we need to generate the deployment configuration? Yes, obviously I want to deploy in the end this application on NetWeaver and add FLP, which is a launchpad configuration. So let's select that as well. And next. Now we chose deploy option and configuration. So system is gonna add 2 more steps. For whatever reason, it does not authenticate. So I just removed 10 from here. When I do that, the system cannot reach the backend, and then it gives me an option to continue. Otherwise it doesn't. So, and we can fix that after, once the deployment configuration file is generated. So now package is temporary, a local package. Deployment description doesn't matter what we enter, but let's enter user info app. And then is it a business technology platform system? No, it's ABAP NetWeaver on-prem. The name, this is the application name. It has to be in a user namespace, Z or Y. So let's start with Z. Next, semantic object. So let's leave it user info and action display, and then title is user info, and finish. Now this will generate the project structure and all the necessary files we need. Okay, so there are a bunch of options here. You can play around with them. Now looking at the folder structure, we have the VS Code as a project configuration file. Node modules, these are Node.js modules which assist us in building, deploying, or running applications locally. A web app folder is where we have all our files, all our model files, our fragments, or our views. So everything is in web app. It also creates a Git file. So if you intend to deploy this on a Git repository, then it makes it easier. Package.json, this is a list of packages required for Node.js. And deploy YAML and local YAML, these are the files which are used for a deploy. Like I said earlier, I removed a 0 from there, so I'm going to add back here. So this will deploy on this URL. Then local, this is the prerequisites, and UI5. So this has some middleware configuration where if we run this application locally, this is gonna reroute our local request to the backend. And there's one more thing we can do. So usually the environment files are supported. So instead entering password every time, you can add a environment file in the system. So I'm gonna erase that. You will not see it anyway. Okay, so our project is ready. Now if we if you want to test this project, you can run npm start on a command. We have to be in the folder. Let me close that, and cv user info. This is our project folder, and here I will run npm start, and this should deploy browser and our application. User ID, password, and then so this is our application, the list application. Now if I say go, this is not gonna work because remember we did build the model, the gateway service, but we did not implement any logic. We just built the model. So based on a model, it was able to generate the UI, but we don't have data yet. We did not connect that dot. So we'll go back to our model, and under service, under runtime artifacts, select the dcp-ext class, and then from here you can navigate to the workbench editor, and in here we will implement the method which is in the error, which is user info set get entity set. So let's go back there, user info set get entity set, this one. So let's redefine this method, save and activate. Okay, so let's come back here, and then we'll do one more time, go. So now this time I don't have to refresh, but you will see the difference. Now there's no more error. It works. There's no data because we did not write anything in our service yet. So this is the first part. Now if I show you list of columns here, we can see this these labels are actually coming from our data model. So if we go back to our service builder, under properties, user info properties, this is the label column. So each property has attributes, a few attributes, and label is one of the attribute. This we can see it in, let's go back to our let me close. So when we generated our project, it also created a local service and and it extracted metadata from our service and it puts in this file. So if we take a look at this file, these are the properties which we can see it in the project here, and then each property has some attributes like name or type, or another one is a label, and this is the property, label property, which is shown on the screen. So to change our label, we can change here. So let's say first name I want to change. I will go here and I will say instead first name without space, I will add a space, change, save and regenerate. I will regenerate my data model. Now if I go back and deploy my application, I will have this change in the app. So let's close, and there are two ways of doing this thing, these changes. So first, let's do it from data model. Okay, again I have to enter password because I maintain only deploy configuration, did not maintain for proxy, and go. So we don't have any data as usual, but now if you see the label for this column is changed. There was no space, now there's a space, and we just made a change in our data model which reflects here. So a few things we can change in the data model, and there are few things which we cannot. So for those we can use annotations, and that's where annotations come in a picture. Now, like I said earlier, annotations are nothing but extensions to metadata information, and whenever we generate a project, it also generates the annotation file. So if you look under your web app, and under web app there is a folder for annotations, annotation folder, and under annotations there will be XML file, annotation.xml file. Now by default the project doesn't create any annotations. There is a wizard to create annotations, or you can do it manually one by one. Now we are going to create manually annotation to update our label for last name. We know first name, we just fixed it in our data model, but let's fix the last name as well, and we will fix it in using our annotation. So in annotations, under schema, you go here and you use the auto completion key, control and spacebar, select annotation. Then we have to select target entity or a property. So but we cannot just select property directly. We have to select the path first. That means first entity and then property. So our entity is user info. So let's select user info, and our property is last name. So / last name. Now, whatever we do under this annotation tag is applicable for that property. And like I said, I want to change label. So how about using common label? Now the term common label here, the first part common is actually coming from here. If you notice here, we have alias definition for this namespace as a common, and then whenever we use, instead using this long namespace, we can just use the alias as a common. So common.label will change the label of this attribute of this property. Now here we can directly put whatever value we want, but it's better we put it in I18N for multilingual support. And whenever we enter a constant text, the VS Code editor prompts for a fix, so we can use that. So it's saying there's a quick fix, so select that and click. This will generate entry into I18N. Instead doing it manually, it will add it there. So if we go here and see, we have this entry, and let's change now this to last name, uppercase, space, and save, and we'll save the annotation as well. Now if we run our project again, npm start, now we should have a different label for last name, meaning with space. So let's go here and we can see it here. So we fixed our first name through data model and last name through annotation. Now this is just a basic annotation. There are a lot more things we can do, but for this session, I'm gonna stop here, and we'll resume in the next session from taking this annotation, from taking this project and adding more annotation. For example, to have a drop-down list or to have records in our list. So stay tuned for the next video. Thank you.